illegal immigrant, already deported 5 times, found living in the UK again. If you just couldn't get sick and tired of reading these headlines, you would want to cry. Let's go straight to my great guest, someone I've admired for a long time, I must confess, Stephen Woolfe, who's a migration expert and former MEP. He's now the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Stephen, how are you?
Oh, good afternoon, Jonathan. I'm fine, and I'd be a lot happier if we weren't listening to stories where illegal migrants who have committed crimes are deported and are now allowed to come back in and deported and brought back in again.
You must be sick and tired in your day-to-day job of having to deal with such stories, right, and having to come back on airwaves to talk about it. With this particular case, what is it? He was first removed in November 2015, then in February 2019, then in June 2021, then in May 2022, and in August 2023. He's a Lithuanian. Last time I checked, Lithuania isn't a country that is particularly dangerous, isn't in need of people fleeing from it, and ultimately is, a sort of, standard European type of country. Why on earth are people from Lithuania trying to come over here and having to relentlessly be deported?
Well, maybe he just doesn't have enough Bitcoin or the ability to be able to do all the clever stuff that Lithuanians I know in the tech world do. I think generally, Jonathan, it's really surprising. You're talking about Lithuania, but in the research that we did over the over 1 million asylum applicants that have made applications to the UK since the year 2000, that Poland, Portugal, Spain, France, all of those countries have people claiming asylum despite the fact they're our European neighbours, and even when we were members of the European Union with them. And I think the problem with it is it points to a very sad fact about our asylum system. Our asylum system allows these people to make the claims, even though we know they're nonsense. No one's fleeing torture. It's because it's not just about the UN Refugee Convention. It's not just about fleeing torture. It's about membership of the European Courts of Human Rights, which has translated a kind of plethora of open-ended questions of why we can allow certain people in through our common law. But more importantly, Jonathan, this is the point I've been trying to push over the last year and a half, is that when you look at the figures, over 70% of people we now grant the ability to remain permanently in this country, i.e. what we'd call asylum, is discretionary. It's within the rules of our own Home Office that's making the decisions of why people can stay. That's why you have people from Lithuania claiming.
Were you quite concerned, Stephen, that Sir Keir Starmer's not made immigration one of his 6 milestones, millstones, or God knows what else is in that plethora of numbers that I read out earlier? Do you think that's a mistake from him? Do you think it shows a lack of seriousness? Do you think Labour have got credibility? They have obviously seen an increase in deportations. I think they're saying today it's about 50+% now compared to the year before when the Conservatives were in charge. Do you think Labour's building credibility slowly but surely on this issue?
Well, I think both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party have gross dereliction of duty in not concerning themselves about both illegal migration and the numbers of legal migration. Yes, I've seen the speech that Keir Starmer made about immigration, blaming everything on the Conservative Party. And yes, the Conservative Party did fail by allowing so many legal migrants to come to the country. But why I say he needs to ensure that it's part of his top 2 issues, not just the economy, is because it is impacting the economy so much. Last week, as you remember, the Office of National Statistics published the net migration figures. They upgraded by 106,000, the number of 728,000, they said. So we had nearly 1 million people last year. It was nearly 1 million the year before. But when you put the estimation of the population of Britain with a figure of over 700,000, by the year 2035, we will have 80 million people in this country. That's 10 million people more. House them, school, hospitals, roads, infrastructure, water, electricity. How is all that to be built, maintained, and then paid for through increased taxation? So unless the government is really clear and sensible and takes this deeply, deeply at heart, we're going to struggle even more within the next 10 years to deal with all that increased population.
Well, going on into this article, it says in October, the Sun revealed more illegal migrants were in Britain than any other European nation, kind of linking to your point there, Stephen, as well earlier. Researchers believe that as many as 745,000 were still here, enough to rival the populations of Leeds. And like you say, that's illegal. That's not taking into account the legal migration figures, as you say, that we saw nearly 1 million under the Conservatives in one particular year, millions over time. I agree with you. I think, you know me, I was very firm on this particular issue on the backbench of the Conservative Party. It's one of the things I think that we must absolutely hold our hands up to and apologise. And I think ministers like Matt Vickers had on earlier should be saying sorry over and over again to regain some trust and credibility. Because like you said, the only party that seems to have that credibility at the moment is Reform.
Absolutely, and I think when you're looking at that, I mean, I am looking at their research, and of course, I drafted the fair and flexible immigration policy, both for the Leave campaign, Vote Leave, did it for UKIP, and I've managed to monitor what's happening across all the parties. Reform has some very interesting and very positive policies. The one in, one out is something that could work, but it won't reduce the numbers dramatically. They need to consider much more about how they deal with immigration, jobs, and the economic links together to produce a policy paper that reduces net migration to under 100,000. I don't think we can take it much more than that now, unfortunately, as we could years ago. They could do that, and if they did that credibly, they would blow both the other parties out of the water. But what you're saying, Jonathan, is you're quite right. Those of you like yourself, and I admired what you were doing, were ignored. And yet, if we look across the border now into Europe, we're only seeing the European Council a couple of weeks ago call on the European Commission to introduce tougher standards and rules for deporting people from the European Union. They've now moved it to the Commission. The Commission is now going to move it into Parliament, in the European Parliament. Europe is taking this seriously. And whilst the Labour Party might gloat that they've added an extra 1,000 people to 3,000 people being deported under schemes created by your government, which was the right thing to do, that isn't enough. Other countries across the globe understand the importance of this. Our European neighbours are changing policies to deal with it. And in America, they've now elected someone who will drastically deal with this issue. So we need to get on board, and quickly.
I think President Trump's nominee for the border czar is a man to be reckoned with. I've seen some of his interviews. Blimey, he's not planning on pulling any punches anytime soon. I think we need to see some of that in the United Kingdom. And I hope, Stephen, that whichever political party, but I hope certainly the government to bring you in-house to get some ideas so we can finally get this issue under control. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your information there. Look, I think immigration is one of the biggest challenges of our time. It's a challenge facing Western Europe, as well as obviously Western society. And it is what a future political parties in this day and age are going to be judged by when it comes to trying to gain electoral success. And the Conservative Party needs to say sorry more often. It needs to go away and really come up with a credible plan. I think Labour talk the talk, but no one really believes it. And so it's up to parties like Reform to see if they can benefit off this very big opportunity. But as Stephen says, they too still have to flesh out their plan